probably see I am doing a new setup. I just thought I would do something different from sitting on the bed. Welcome back, everybody. I hope everyone is still staying safe in this crazy quarantine. And since kind of being in quarantine, it's been super hard, and I think it's been hard for a lot of people, and because of that, I think the temptation to go back to a lot of negative behaviors, falling right back into the eating disorder, relapsing, is a lot easier. And just because everything's so much more stressful and there's a lot of other factors that are just kind of coming into play right now, it is super tempting. And because of that, because I struggled a lot with it since this has started, I really kind of had to hold myself accountable and really had to kind of be clear on the reasons why it is not worth going back to that. Lola? Hey, buddy. Come on. Okay. Well, my dog has decided to join us. So I think it just brings up a super important topic overall, which is that throughout recovery, there are a lot of reasons why it doesn't feel worth it. And you really need to have a strong foundation of reasons that you can just tell yourself over and over and over again, this is why being stuck in an eating disorder is so much worse than reality. And I know a lot of these things feel kind of obvious, but I also think part of it is that a lot of the reasons people have for wanting to go back to an eating disorder are kind of taboo and not really talked about too much. And I think we do ourselves a disservice by not bringing it into the open, because if we don't talk about it, then people kind of validate those reasons for wanting to return to eating disorder behaviors and don't really have solid reasons that they can get behind for going back to recovery. The advice of my therapist was to make a list of reasons why I want to go back into the eating disorder, reasons why I miss it, and then kind of creating a list of countering all of those things with the reasons why it's not worth it. And it was super therapeutic, and I know it's those kinds of exercises can feel kind of cliche or feel a little bit what is that going to do? I was so surprised, and it really has given me kind of a concrete thing to have in front of me of anytime I have one of the thoughts of this is why I miss it, this is why I should go back to it. I have right here all of the reasons why I know I want to stick with it. I'm going to probably split it into 2 videos. I have 6 reasons, 6 really strong reasons why I've been tempted to relapse. And then for each of those 6, I have kind of my counter reason for why it's just not worth it. I'm going to do 3 today and then 3 in the next video. So the first one I think is probably one of the most taboo of, I would say, reasons why I've missed my eating disorder, and I don't think it's talked a lot about. I think, like I said, I do think it's important to kind of say this is something that I miss, because if we don't have something to counteract that, then there's no reason that you have in your head or you've heard from other people to not give in to that. One of the things that I've missed a lot going through recovery is the feeling of being sick. So the feeling of being super weak, of not being able to go upstairs without feeling like I'm going to pass out. Even standing up was kind of hard. Things like even being told by a doctor I had low blood pressure, low iron, and these kinds of things that to me validated that I had an eating disorder. Throughout recovery, I think one of the first things I struggled with was the fact that I was gaining weight. In the beginning stages, I was gaining weight, and I was eating a lot more, but I was still in an energy deficit. My body had not really physically, even though I was putting on weight, it hadn't really recovered yet. That's my dog. I don't know if you guys can hear him. I'm gaining weight, I look different, I'm eating a lot more, and I am living the same life that I had when I was stuck in my eating disorder. So what is the point? And that changed when I stuck with it and I stayed super consistent with it. And I kept giving myself the food that I wanted, and I would say that was the hardest part of recovery for me. But I finally had the energy to do all of the things that I could not do when I was in the middle of my eating disorder. The feeling that you get when you naturally start picking up all the things that the eating disorder took away from you. Like, I used to love art and drawing, and I just couldn't, it never even crossed my mind in the middle of my eating disorder. I had so many other things that were on my mind. I didn't have the mental space to put effort into that. And I naturally one day was just kind of like, you know what, I think I'm gonna pick a pencil, grab a notebook, and draw. I miss that. And to even naturally want to do that, it was just the most fulfilling feeling to think that eating had given me back something that I loved. Another one was horseback riding, which is something, I would say horseback riding is like my favorite thing in the world to do. And for a little bit when I was in the middle of my disorder, I did ride. I barely had the energy to kind of like physically ride, let alone like do it and then like actually get pleasure out of it and enjoy it. I literally realized I had spent 10 years of my life not even knowing what it felt like to be able to even put 100% effort in. The only feeling I knew was going into everything, barely having energy to do it, not ever fully enjoying these things that for when I was younger, loved, like absolutely adored doing. No comparison. It is worth every minute of debating and hating the recovery process just to get to that point. So that's number one. Number two was I missed kind of like the control in the structure of body checking. Taking pictures of myself and physically just like measuring myself, measuring my arm size, like all of that kind of stuff, my legs. And I miss that. Like you do hit a point where you have to kind of let go and realize you don't have control over what your body looks like every second of the day. I missed having the structure of like, I know if I feel like this, I'll do this to compensate and this to restrict. And it just felt like a pattern I could fall back on. The other side of that, so the recovery side of that is a much better feeling. I now have like the freedom. My self-worth is like spread out a lot more beyond how big my thighs are, what my stomach looks like. And I still struggle with body image issues. It isn't the primary thing I care about anymore. It isn't my only source of Oslo. No, Oslo. No. I'm sorry. No. No, Oslo. Can you even see this? No, Oslo. I'm sorry. Okay, so unfortunately after my first question, the video got blurry and I have to redo it because that's going to drive me absolutely insane. And I don't think anyone wants to watch a video where I'm out of focus for 3/4 of the time. How I overcame the need to go back to body checking and like that kind of structure in my day kind of thing was that it genuinely started taking up less mental space for me. Once you start kind of growing your world and getting things that you love that you can do, whether it's horseback riding or art, or I am majoring in Italian, so being able to kind of learn a language and speak a language with someone else is so cool to me. Once you start kind of building who you are and building your world beyond this eating disorder, you really start valuing things beyond these really minute details about yourself. Body image is always going to be something that's challenging for me, but I really have started to develop the mentality of not having to love my body, loving what it allows me to do. And I was saying this before I realized my video was completely screwed up, but to rely solely on what you look like as being the number one most important element of who you are is so dangerous because it is constantly changing. To have things about myself that are unrelated to body image and that I can truly rely on, things that activities I love to do, characteristics about myself, like personality wise, who I am, those are things that I can go back to all of the time because they'll always be there. It's so awesome to be able to kind of let go of trying to control this thing that I know will basically be constantly shifting. It's about valuing parts of yourself beyond, genuinely valuing parts of yourself beyond what you look like and how thin you are. So the last one that I'm going to do in this series thing today, basically having other people think that I was sick, feeling like they had to constantly worry if I was eating enough, worry if I had an eating disorder, monitor what I was eating, having a relationship where I knew people were concerned about me and me having an eating disorder. I mean, this is a huge one because, again, like, the thought that all of my relationships with people at the time I thought were based on like on how I looked is so unhealthy. And I mean, in retrospect, like, when you think about it, it is kind of like bizarre to say out loud and even acknowledge that I thought that any of the friendships I had, family who cared about me, was all because of how I looked. You were constantly feeling like people are going to stop caring about you at any minute, and that no one actually really likes you for who you are. It's based on these things that you have to control all of the time to make sure people don't basically like let go of you and stop caring, which is really sad. And I think it was really hard feeling like worrying that people would basically stop caring about me if I stopped looking a certain way. The first thing is obviously that how you look has nothing to do with how sick you are. And in fact, I've said this from the beginning, but when I was starting to gain weight throughout recovery, that was when my mental health was at its absolute worst, and I was struggling the most with my eating disorder, which obviously was hard for me because I still had the mentality of people are going to think you're less sick because you look this way. I think it's so clear now that the weight that you're at has nothing to do with how sick you are and how deserving you are of help or recovery. They are completely unrelated things. Your BMI is not a determining factor of if you have an eating disorder or not. It's just not. And I think I also can see that if I had gone to people in the middle of when I had started gaining weight, and told them this is what I'm really struggling with, the reaction is the same as if I was X amount skinnier or weighed this amount less. People care about you, cared about me, regardless of what I look like. It has to do with the fact that they care about you, period. It is not contingent on anything. It is about loving you as a person. And I just didn't see that in the middle of my eating disorder. I really solely saw it as like the care and love that you get is in like direct relation to being deserving of it, and you deserve it through being skinny, which is just the most toxic mental cycle to be in. There's so much more to my relationships now than worrying about how other people perceive me. I have a lot more confidence in me as a person because the things that I value about myself extend so much farther beyond what I look like, that I can kind of understand that the reason people love and care about me is for those reasons, which in turn has just given a lot more. I have a lot more trust in my relationships, a lot more faith in my relationships. As I know the things I value about myself, I now can see is also what they value about me. It's based on so much more than the thing that had consumed me for so long. So those are the 3 things, and I hope that people watching this can see it as the reason why sticking with recovery and sticking with being consistent and not falling back into those behaviors is so worth pushing through to get to this other side of all of these so invaluable aspects of life, and why life does become so much more vibrant and fulfilling, and in ways that I hadn't even imagined was possible for quite literally 10 years. So yeah, I will come back with another video in maybe another week or something like that, and I can upload this as like a little reasons why recovery is worth it series onto my channel. I hope everyone's staying safe again, and prioritize your mental health, especially if you have an eating disorder. It can feel like absolute hell. So prioritize yourself. I will be back with more reasons why recovery is worth it. All right. Bye, guys.